In the distant reaches of the galaxy, the Galactic Empire had spread its reach across countless star systems. It was an empire built on power, precision, and an unmatched military. Billions lived under its iron grip, and countless worlds had been brought to heel, each one proving just how futile resistance could be. Earth was no different. To the Empire, it was just a small, irrelevant world on the outskirts of known space, an afterthought. They dismissed the people of Earth as primitive, with technology that lagged behind by centuries. There was nothing there that could pose a threat. But while the Empire turned its gaze to greater conquests, Earth had quietly begun a different path. Beneath the surface, far from the prying eyes of the Empire's spies, a group of scientists and military strategists worked tirelessly on a secret project. They were developing a prototype ship, something unlike anything seen before. It was a gamble, a final attempt to give Earth a chance against the impossible odds they might face one day. They called it the Nemesis. The Nemesis was a product of desperation and ingenuity. Its creators knew they could never match the sheer scale of the Imperial fleet, but maybe, just maybe, they could create something the Empire wouldn't expect. They developed experimental energy weapons, powerful shields, and an advanced AI capable of processing decisions faster than any human could. It was revolutionary, untested, and risky. But in the face of what they were up against, risks had to be taken. Earth's leaders knew they were playing with fire, but the flames were already at their doorstep. Word of Earth's quiet advancements had begun to spread, like whispers in the dark. The Empire, ever vigilant, had caught wind of these rumors. They couldn't fathom that this tiny backwater planet could develop anything of significance, but the very idea of someone rising against them was intolerable. They had to remind Earth, and the galaxy, what happened when anyone dared to challenge their rule. A massive Imperial fleet, a display of overwhelming force, was dispatched to Earth's solar system. Thousands of warships, each more advanced than anything Earth had ever seen, appeared on the edges of human territory. Their orders were simple: subjugate the planet, crush any resistance, and make an example out of Earth. To them, it was a routine mission, a minor skirmish in the grand scheme of their dominance. On Earth, the arrival of the Imperial fleet sent waves of fear through every level of society. Panic and resignation threatened to take hold, but the leaders of Earth had prepared for this moment. They couldn't fight the Empire conventionally, no one could. Instead, they would take a gamble. With trembling hands and steely resolve, they made the call to launch Nemesis. The Nemesis took flight, a lone vessel against the might of an entire fleet. Its dark, sleek shape cut through the void of space, heading straight for the heart of the Imperial Armada. On board was a crew that knew the stakes. They were the last line of defense, a handful of brave souls standing between Earth and annihilation. To the Empire, the sight of a single ship approaching their overwhelming force was laughable. They saw it as a last act of defiance from a desperate world. The Imperial commanders opened communications, mocking the humans' audacity. They assured them of swift destruction, of their place in the natural order, and how they would serve as an example to any others who thought of rebellion. Earth did not reply. The Nemesis moved steadily forward, the crew focused on their task. Every system was checked, every calculation reviewed, as they closed the gap between themselves and the might of the Empire. Then, without warning, the Nemesis made its move. In an instant, it accelerated with a speed that no Imperial ship could match. It weaved through the first line of the Imperial blockade, dodging laser fire with a precision that stunned its enemies. The crew worked in perfect synchrony with the ship's AI, their actions blending together seamlessly as they pushed the limits of what their vessel could do. The first shot from the Nemesis tore through the hull of an Imperial battleship. The energy weapon, unlike anything the Empire had seen, left nothing but molten wreckage in its wake. The Imperial commanders, who had been so confident, now stared at their displays in shock. The lone ship, Earth's last hope, had done what they believed impossible. The battle had just begun, but already the tides were shifting. The Nemesis danced among the stars, its weapons blazing, and with every Imperial ship that fell, Earth's defiance grew stronger. The people of Earth, watching from their screens, dared to hope. They knew they were still outnumbered, still facing the greatest military force the galaxy had ever seen, but they also knew one undeniable truth: they were not beaten yet. The Imperial fleet, once a symbol of unchallenged power, had been forced to recognize the Nemesis as a real threat. What was supposed to be a simple show of force had turned into something they hadn't anticipated. As the battle raged on, the crew of the Nemesis pushed forward, fully aware of the odds, yet refusing to yield. The Galactic Empire had overlooked Earth, but Earth had never overlooked the possibility of this day. And now, with their backs against the wall, they were determined to show the galaxy that they would not go quietly, that they were ready to fight, even if it was with their very last breath. The Imperial fleet, stretched across the dark expanse of space, was an impressive sight to behold, thousands of warships poised to strike, shimmering like cold, unforgiving stars. They were confident, utterly convinced that this mission was merely a formality, a reminder to Earth of its place. In their eyes, the appearance of a single human vessel, the Nemesis, was almost laughable. They couldn't fathom that one ship could pose any real threat to their vast fleet. On board the Imperial flagship, the commanders watched with amused disdain as the Nemesis made its approach. They considered it a symbolic act, a show of defiance before the inevitable defeat. Their communications channels crackled with arrogant taunts, promising swift obliteration. It was nothing they hadn't done before. Quelling resistance with overwhelming power was practically routine. But what happened next was anything but. The Nemesis surged forward, moving with an agility that the Empire's commanders did not expect. It wasn't a lumbering vessel or an outdated relic trying to survive. It moved like a predator, darting between the lines of the Imperial blockade with startling precision. For a moment, the taunting voices fell silent, replaced by hurried orders and confused exclamations. The Nemesis was no mere target, it was a ghost, slipping through the cracks in their defenses. The first barrage of laser fire was unleashed, a dazzling storm of energy intended to end the battle before it began. Yet the Nemesis twisted and turned, narrowly evading the beams that lanced towards it. The ship's AI, working in tandem with the human crew, calculated each move in fractions of a second. The ship responded like it was part of the crew, rather than a tool to be wielded. For the Imperial fleet, it was like trying to swat a fly that was always just out of reach. Then came the human response, a blinding beam fired from the Nemesis, aimed with surgical precision at one of the largest Imperial battleships. It cut through the ship's shields as if they were nothing, slicing deep into its hull, and in a heartbeat, the battleship was gone, reduced to a drifting hulk. The remaining Imperial ships hesitated, caught off guard by the sheer power of the attack. It wasn't just the strength of the weapon, it was the way it had been delivered. The Nemesis struck with precision, without wasted energy or hesitation, as if it knew every weakness the Imperial fleet possessed. Panic rippled through the Imperial ranks. They weren't facing the feeble resistance they expected. They were facing something else entirely, something that defied their understanding. The Imperial commanders barked orders, trying to reorganize, to bring their overwhelming numbers to bear. But the Nemesis kept moving, weaving through their formation, exploiting every gap, every moment of confusion. It danced like a needle through fabric, its weapons finding the soft spots of the Empire's iron fist. Every time the Nemesis fired, it was a reminder of what they had overlooked. The energy weapons on board the ship were unlike anything the Empire had encountered, some kind of advanced plasma technology that bypassed their shields, tearing their ships apart. The Empire had always believed that their technological edge was insurmountable, that no one could surpass them. Yet here was this tiny, primitive planet fielding a ship that defied their expectations. On board the Nemesis, the atmosphere was intense but focused. The crew was well aware of the odds. They were one ship against thousands, but they moved with purpose. The seasoned soldiers and brilliant engineers, each performing their roles without hesitation, had trained for this moment, knowing it could be the last stand for Earth. They knew that the Nemesis had to prove itself here and now, or it would all be over. In the command center of the Imperial flagship, fear began to replace arrogance. They had severely underestimated Earth, and now they were paying the price. The Nemesis struck again, and another battleship exploded, its fragments scattering into the void. The Imperial commanders scrambled to adapt, to come up with a plan that could stop this ship before it tore their entire fleet apart. But for all their training, for all their supposed superiority, they found themselves reacting, rather than leading. The difference between the two sides became starkly clear. The Empire was a machine, vast and powerful, but rigid, used to overwhelming their enemies through sheer force. The Nemesis, however, was something else. It was human ingenuity and adaptability in its purest form. The ship's AI processed data faster than any Imperial system, but it was the human touch, the unpredictability, the willingness to take risks, that made all the difference. The crew of the Nemesis didn't just follow protocol. They improvised, they adapted, they fought like their entire world depended on it, because it did. The Nemesis continued to dismantle the Imperial fleet piece by piece. It wasn't invincible. The ship took hits, the shields flickered, and damage reports came in, but it kept moving. It kept fighting. And with every Imperial ship that fell, the morale of the humans rose. On Earth, people watched the battle unfold in real time, their hearts pounding with fear and hope. They saw their last hope not just surviving but winning, against all odds. The Empire, which had always seemed untouchable, was now faltering before their very eyes. The Imperial commanders finally gave the order to pull back, to regroup and reconsider their approach. This was not how it was supposed to go. They were supposed to be the hammer that crushed resistance, not the ones being cut down. As the Nemesis advanced, the once organized Imperial formation began to unravel, and the mighty fleet that had arrived to subjugate Earth started to retreat. The people of Earth dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could survive this. The Nemesis had done the impossible. It had not only resisted the Empire's overwhelming force but had beaten them back, even if only for the moment. The cost was still unknown, the danger far from over, but humanity had shown that they would not be pushed aside. They had shown that even the smallest, most underestimated force could stand up when everything was on the line. The Galactic Empire had come to Earth expecting to crush any defiance in a single blow. Instead, they found themselves facing a weapon forged from humanity's determination and resourcefulness. They realized too late that Earth's strength wasn't in the size of its fleet or the advancement of its technology, but in its people, in their ability to adapt, to rise to the occasion, and to fight with everything they had. And now, the Empire had to deal with the consequences of their arrogance. The battle between the Nemesis and the Galactic Empire's fleet was no longer a straightforward show of dominance. It had transformed into something far more profound. This lone prototype ship had exposed the Empire's vulnerability, something unimaginable just moments before. The shift was not just tactical, it was psychological. What was meant to be a swift demonstration of superiority had become a desperate struggle to avoid a humiliating defeat. Inside the Nemesis, every crew member was at their post, each aware that the stakes were beyond personal survival. This was about proving that humanity could endure, that they had the spirit to resist even the most colossal of enemies. The crew worked with flawless coordination, a dance of military precision and raw instinct, their experience now translating into moments of brilliance on the battlefield. These weren't just warriors, they were engineers, tacticians, and problem solvers, pushing themselves and their ship to the very limits. The ship's AI played a pivotal role, processing data and managing subsystems faster than any human could, yet it was the human element that made all the difference. It was the quick decision-making under pressure, the instinct to take risks when necessary, that gave the Nemesis its edge. Every time the Empire thought they had predicted the ship's next move, the Nemesis twisted into a direction they hadn't accounted for, turning what should have been an easy battle into a relentless test of endurance and adaptability. One of the crucial advantages the Nemesis had was its unpredictability. Imperial ships followed strict battle protocols, a chain of command that ensured order but stifled flexibility. The Nemesis, meanwhile, operated on the fly, taking gambles, exploiting opportunities that a pre-programmed fleet would ignore. When the Nemesis cut its engines and drifted into the shadow of a destroyed Imperial ship, using it as cover while recalibrating its shields, it was not something any Imperial AI could have anticipated. It was that kind of ingenuity that threw the Imperial commanders off balance, forcing them to second-guess their every order. The human crew, though outnumbered, was unyielding. They knew they had to press their advantage, had to make every second count before the Empire could regroup. One of the young engineers, barely out of the academy, suggested rerouting power from the ship's life support to double the shields momentarily during the heaviest barrage. It was a dangerous move, a calculated risk that could easily backfire. Yet, in this moment of life and death, they chose to trust in one another and in the resilience of their vessel. The Nemesis endured, and it struck back with vicious precision. Another beam of energy lanced across the void, piercing the Imperial flagship's primary hull. The explosion that followed shook the formation, sending panic through the surrounding ships. The Imperial fleet, so accustomed to winning through overwhelming force, found itself paralyzed, its cohesion unraveling in real time. There was no precedent for this, no protocol on how to handle being outmatched by a single ship. Earth's people watched in awe, a mixture of disbelief and growing pride swelling within them. It wasn't just the advanced technology on board the Nemesis that gave them hope. It was the human hands guiding that technology. It was the fearless piloting, the improvisation, the ability to endure when faced with the impossible. In those moments, the Nemesis was more than a ship. It was a beacon of what humanity could achieve when pushed to the edge, a testament to their resilience and unwillingness to be conquered. For the Empire, the battle was turning. The aftermath of the battle was a scene that the Galactic Empire had never imagined they would face. The once mighty Imperial fleet, a force that had subjugated countless worlds, was in disarray. What had begun as a confident advance on a primitive planet had ended in an embarrassing defeat at the hands of a single, untested ship. The Nemesis had defied everything the Empire knew about warfare, and now the shattered remains of the Imperial Armada limped away, retreating from the system. It was an outcome that neither side had anticipated. On Earth, a sense of cautious celebration filled the air. People emerged from their shelters, looked up to the stars, and realized that they were still free. It wasn't over. The Galactic Empire was not an enemy that would simply walk away from such a humiliation, but this victory was a crucial statement. It said that Earth would not be conquered without a fight, that humanity was more than capable of holding its own, even against the greatest force the galaxy had ever seen. The Nemesis returned to Earth, its crew hailed as heroes. There were no grand parades, no official declarations of triumph, only the realization that they had bought themselves some time. The ship bore the scars of battle, its hull pockmarked with damage, systems pushed to the brink of collapse. But it had endured, and so had its crew. For them, it was a mixture of exhaustion and relief. They had done the impossible, but they knew the true challenge still lay ahead. Back in the heart of the Empire, the news of the defeat spread like wildfire. The shock of losing to a single ship, a ship from a planet they had dismissed as insignificant, shook the foundations of their pride. The leaders of the Empire convened to discuss their options. There was outrage, confusion, disbelief. How could their mighty fleet be turned away by one ship? It made no sense according to their established beliefs, their understanding of military might. They had always seen themselves as untouchable, a force that no one could resist, yet here was undeniable proof that they were vulnerable. There were voices among the leadership demanding immediate retaliation, a show of strength that would erase the embarrassment of their defeat. They wanted to return to Earth with a force so overwhelming that nothing could stand in its way. But there were also others, voices that were less loud but carried the weight of reason, who argued for a different approach. They suggested caution, an analysis of what had gone wrong, an understanding of how Earth had developed such technology without the Empire's knowledge. Perhaps Earth wasn't the backwater they had assumed. Perhaps there was more to humanity than they had ever considered. For the first time, the Empire found itself at a crossroads. The straightforward path of crushing resistance no longer seemed as certain. The Nemesis had changed the dynamics, and now the Empire had to choose between doubling down on force or understanding what had allowed Earth to rise to this level of defiance. It was a moment of reckoning, a realization that their iron grip might not be as unbreakable as they had always believed. For Earth, the battle had given them a glimmer of hope. They knew that the Empire would be back, that this was only a reprieve rather than a full victory. But that hope mattered. It inspired not just the crew of the Nemesis, but every scientist, every engineer, every individual who watched as one ship stood against 1,000. It ignited a sense of purpose across the planet. Humanity was now on a new trajectory, one where they could no longer afford to remain hidden in the shadows of the galaxy. They had been forced into the galactic stage, and now they had to be ready for whatever came next. The crew of the Nemesis, veterans and rookies alike, were transformed by what they had experienced. They had faced overwhelming odds and come out the other side, battered but victorious. They knew they would need to prepare for what lay ahead, to improve upon their successes and learn from their near misses. The battle had shown them what worked, but it had also exposed their vulnerabilities. The Nemesis had been their last hope, but now it was their starting point, the foundation upon which they would build their future defenses. In the days following the battle, efforts began to repair and upgrade the Nemesis, to make it stronger, faster, more capable of standing against whatever the Empire might throw at them next. The engineers who had worked on the ship from its inception now saw it as a symbol of what humanity could achieve. They worked tirelessly, driven by the knowledge that the next confrontation might be even more brutal. They couldn't afford to be complacent, and they wouldn't be. Across the galaxy, the story of Earth's defiance began to spread. Other planets, other species who had lived under the Empire's thumb, heard whispers of the battle, of how a tiny, overlooked planet had stood up to the might of the Galactic Empire, and had made them retreat. It was a story that resonated, that planted seeds of rebellion and resistance in places the Empire had long thought secure. It wasn't just about Earth anymore, it was about hope, about the possibility that even the greatest power could be challenged. The Empire, for all its strength, had shown cracks in its armor. They were no longer untouchable, and that realization echoed across the galaxy. The leaders of the Empire knew they had to act, but now they had to do so knowing that their foes were no longer confined to the shadows. They had been forced to acknowledge Earth's presence, to recognize humanity as a force that could no longer be ignored. And for Earth, the journey was just beginning. The people knew they were still at risk, still under the looming threat of a second, more forceful invasion. But they were not afraid. They had faced the might of the Empire, and they had held their ground. They were no longer the forgotten world at the edge of the galaxy. They were a beacon, a testament to what could happen when a people refused to surrender, refused to be broken. The Nemesis had obliterated the Empire's fleet, but more importantly, it had shattered the illusion of invincibility that the Empire had carefully crafted. Now, as humanity looked to the stars, they did so with determination and a renewed sense of purpose. They knew what was coming, and they knew it would be a struggle. But they were ready to meet that challenge head-on, to fight for their place in the galaxy, and to show the Empire that Earth was no longer to be overlooked.